Good morning. I am Dr. Arthur Othonos. I am the president of the Homeopathic Academy, and this is the fourth lesson of a series conducted by Homeopathic Academy as a free e-learning project in collaboration with the Homeopathy Data Bank and the Marathon International Summer School. In our first lesson, we have talked about the introduction to homeopathy. In the second and third lesson, we have discussed about classical, miasmatic, constitutional homeopathy, the method that we teach in Homeopathic Academy. And we have explained the differences between this method, the classical homeopathy method, and repertorizing, keynote prescribing, and computer expert systems. In this lesson, we are now starting the Materia Medica lectures. We are going to describe and analyze the constitution Natrum Muriaticum. Natrum Muriaticum is the typical representative of the psoric miasm. So it's a chance to talk both about the psoric miasm and a typical representative, a constitution that is a typical representative of the psoric miasm. First of all, we have to talk about the miasmatic theory. Hahnemann discovered and founded homeopathy, applying the double-blind trial, the experimentation of double-blind trial in the form of proving, and applied the law of similars and created the homeopathic therapeutic system. After 20 years of applying homeopathy, that is, at that time, prescribing the remedy that was similar to the natural illness, the acute natural illness of his times. For example, he gave belladonna for a common cold with fever, or he gave berberis for a urine infection that had the modalities and the characteristics of berberis, and so on. He found out that although he had very good results in acute illnesses, despite that, he had an acute illness recurring, coming back again and again. He found out that he could cure a common cold, but he couldn't cure most of the times recurrent colds in a child, for example. Or he could cure an acute arthritis, but he couldn't cure permanently the recurrent arthritis of a certain person. For 20 years, he was troubled by this thing. He said to himself that any acute illness must be the recurrence of a chronic illness. He said that there must be some chronic predispositions to each person, and each time these chronic predispositions are affected and stimulated by external factors, psychological or physical, then the vital force of the organism drops down, and then the acute illness comes. So he said that what generates these chronic predispositions in every man are the miasms, the miasmatic influences. He found out that even from our birth we have these chronic predispositions, either physical or psychological, and from our very birth we are influenced by certain constitutions, for example phosphor, lyrobodium, and so on. During our life we are influenced by certain other constitutions, and accordingly we are affected by the three miasms. He said that man, when he was created and when he was living in paradise, in the spiritual world, as a spiritual being, he didn't have any kind of illness. He was free from disorder, free from imbalance, psychologically and physically. But when we have the fall of the Adam and Eve, of the first man, and man became not just a spiritual being, but also a being that had, apart from the spirit, the soul level, the psychological level, and the physical level, he became predisposed to illness. So the origin of illness comes from the psoric, what he called psoric miasm. And from that time on, psychotic miasm and syphilitic miasm were created. This was a theoretical attempt, being a Christian himself, to explain the origin of illness in general. It doesn't matter if we consider it true or not. The important thing is that other also theories from different points of view and other philosophical or religious theories have come to the same conclusions. I will not go on with details on the subject. We will have a special lesson about it. What I am interested in this lesson is to give you the characteristics of the three miasms, and especially of the psoric miasm, because in homeopathy and in classical miasmatic constitutional homeopathy that we practice here in Homeopathic Academy, each theoretical scheme has a very practical effect in everyday clinical practice. So, when we talk about the psoric miasm as a theory, when we come to the diagnose and treatment of illness, we use it, we apply it in clinical practice. So, In acupuncture, they have talked about yin and yang. In ancient Greece, they have said the same things. Hippocrates, talking about the 4 types of human organisms, he talked also about the psoric and psychotic and syphilitic miasm, talking about the sanguine type, the phlegmatic type, and the choleric type. We will not go into details. What I want you to give importance is that we have the 3 miasms and their characteristics. We have the psoric or yin miasm, we have the psychotic or yang miasm, and we have the syphilitic. Or yin-yang disorder. What are their characteristics? If we talk about the physical characteristics, we talk about cold, a cold organism, a hot organism, and a hot or cold disordered condition. When we talk about functions, we've got the hypofunction and the hyperfunction. For example, constipation, diarrhea, hypothyroidism, hyperthyroidism, slow pulse, fast pulse. And here we have got the malfunction. In a special way. When we, other characteristics, when we come to the psychological field, we have, let's say, irritability. We have less irritability than normal. The yin person doesn't get angry easily and doesn't express his anger easily. He can even be a coward. The psychotic person is usually very irritable and irascible, and he expresses his anger very easily, and his anger passes very quickly and with no hard feelings. While the syphilitic person may be violent and destroy other people, things, or himself. Violent and destructive. When it comes to principles, the psoric person tends to adopt principles and to believe honestly to principles and be attached to principles, strictly attached to principles. And this makes him, this troubles his life. And so he easily becomes the victim of a syphilitic person who uses principles in order to serve himself, his ego. While the psychotic person doesn't deal or care so much about principles, not that he is a person that is immoral, but in the sense that his main concern is to enjoy life and not deal with principles and morals and sins and so on. He wants to enjoy sex, food, company, and so on. While the syphilitic, due to his great ego, uses principles to manipulate other people. The thought of the psoric person is deep. The thought is scholastic, and organized. He likes to deal with theories, explanations, and so on. The thought of the psychotic person is shallow. He doesn't want to think a lot or sophisticated things and theories and so on. He is very simple-minded because he wants to enjoy life, not to explain life. The syphilitic person has a thought that serves his ego, and his thinking is perverted. Perversion is a main characteristic of the syphilitic miasm. He turns the black thing into white and the white into black in order to manipulate others and serve himself. The emotions, the emotions of the psoric person are deep, sincere, and he is very attached to the emotions, so he easily gets hurt and becomes sad. While the emotions of the psychotic person are shallow again and change easily. He has changeable mood. Superficial emotions that change easily and come and go. The syphilitic person has perverted feelings, emotions that serve his ego and that are deliberate. And he also exaggerates. Exaggeration and perversion are the two characteristics of the syphilitic miasm in all things. Exaggeration and perversion, and deliberate thinking and acting in order to serve his ego. Behavior. The psoric behavior is slow, sincere, and he tends to adopt the rules of behavior of the society he lives in, of the family he lives in, of the work he works, of the job he works. While the psychotic behavior is more shallow, more unpredictable, and his behavior serves his main tendency to enjoy life. While the syphilitic behavior is most of the times unpredictable, it has exaggeration, perversion, and manipulation of others in order to serve his ego. We have given some general characteristics of the psoric, the psychotic, and the syphilitic miasm. As I said before, it's not the task of this lesson to talk in details about miasms. We want to focus on the characteristics of the three miasms, and especially of the psoric miasm. Because when we talk about the constitution Natrum Muriaticum, which is the typical representative of the psoric miasm, we will need it. And we will explain things much more. Let's go to the constitution Natrum Muriaticum. Whenever we will analyze, describe and analyze any chronic constitution, we will do it by the way that classical miasmatic constitutional homeopathy does. That is, we will give a general picture and analyze hierarchically the constitution from what's first and important to the last and less important. So we will talk about the miasmatic synthesis and essence of Natrum Muriaticum, miasmatic synthesis, miasms and essence. Then we will talk about the psychological profile of the constitution during the state of pathology phase A. Phase A, that is, at the state of clinical health. Then we will talk about the background. We will explain it later. The background, the body type, and the non-verbal data. Then we are going to have the constitutional diagram of the constitution. We will proceed to the mind rubrics from Kent's Repertory and Materia Medica, to the generalities rubrics, and then we will go to the acute illnesses. So, from what you see, we try to employ the homeopathic laws during each and every act that we do, in training, in diagnosis, in treatment. Because only then we will be scientific if we try to follow homeopathic laws and holistic thinking. And that's one very special characteristic of the method of classical miasmatic constitutional homeopathy. We employ homeopathic laws in all procedures, even in education. This scheme is in accordance with the law of the whole. We try to give the whole picture, yet in accordance also with the law of hierarchy. We give much focus and emphasis on things that are more important: miasms, essence, psychological profile. We give emphasis on the generals, not on the local symptoms. We give emphasis on the pathology phase A at the state of clinical health. We give emphasis on characteristics, not on symptoms during acute illness. We give emphasis on chronic illness and less emphasis on acute illness. Now, and we apply the law of the similars, the law of similarity, because we try to have full similarity. We prescribe a remedy only if it has full similarity with our patient. Psychological level, miasms, physical level. Now, let's try to talk about the constitution Natrum Muriaticum. Again, we have to discriminate between three things, as we have said in previous lessons. We have the salt, the mineral, the salt. We have the mineral Natrum Muriaticum, which is the common cooking salt. That is, the chemical type is Natrum Muriaticum. We have the mineral Natrum Muriaticum. When we do the proving, we have the proving picture of Natrum Muriaticum. Proving picture of Natrum Muriaticum. Then we have the person the patient, who is always happy. We have the person that is affected by the constitution, wait a minute. We have the miasm, and then we have the constitution Natrum Muriaticum. And then we have the natural illness. Natrum Muriaticum. This is an artificial illness produced in the laboratory in experimental conditions. So, we have to discriminate between the mineral Natrum Muriaticum, which is a mineral, a material thing, the proving picture of Natrum Muriaticum, which is an artificial illness, a set of symptoms, a sum of symptoms and signs, the constitution Natrum Muriaticum, which is a negative energy, that external negative energy that disorders the vital force of a healthy person and produces a natural illness of the type of Natrum Muriaticum. And then we have, through potenization, the creation of the homeopathic remedy, energy homeopathic remedy, Natrum Muriaticum. All these 5 things, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, are all called Natrum Muriaticum. But this is a plant, this is a negative energy state, this is a proving picture, an artificial illness, this is a natural illness, and this is an energy homeopathic remedy. When we take the case, the history, the homeopathic history from a patient, we form a picture of a natural illness. We go back to our materia medicas and see, is there a similar, according to the law of similarity, is there a similar proving picture? If it is, then we take the mineral that corresponds to this proving picture, we potenize it, we create the relevant homeopathic remedy, we give it to the patient, and this natural illness is cured. So, when we describe the characteristics of a certain constitution, we talk about the characteristics of the constitution Natrum Muriaticum. We talk about the constitutional effect, the natural illness of the patient Natrum Muriaticum. So, this is what we describe when we analyze a certain constitution. It's important to understand this discrimination. Because we confuse the remedy with the constitutional effect, the natural illness and the proving picture. Whenever I talk about a certain constitution, I talk about the constitutional effects on natural illness, on a human being, the natural illness. So, let's go and analyze the characteristics of Natrum Muriaticum constitutional effects. The way we describe things here in classical miasmatic constitutional homeopathy, as I told you before, is first to analyze the center, the main idea, the essence. This essence has to do with two things. With the main miasmatic influences to this constitution, and the main characteristics, the central characteristics. In Natrum Muriaticum, the essence is that it is a psoric a very psoric, introvert, romantic, sensitive, mostly woman. Psoric, introvert, romantic, sensitive woman. These three things are psoric characteristics. Introvert, romantic, and sensitive are psoric characteristics. So we have to deal with a very psoric person, mainly woman. Why woman? Because most of the times it suits better the female characteristics. Let me give you a picture in order to set this thing in your mind. We don't find Natrum Muriaticum women easily nowadays because we live in a syphilitic era. And syphilitic constitutions are the most frequent nowadays. So, if we go back on the romantic eras, 100 years, 200, 300 years ago, or in Renaissance, or in older times, what was the position of a woman? We had the Western societies where men predominate, were the dominant members of the family, the males, men, and women had to stay mostly in the house, doing the everyday care of the house, caring for the children, for the house, for the family in general. And in the past, they were not even educated, or when they were educated with studies that were about art, literature, and so on. When a young daughter was raised. She was raised to be conservative, was not allowed to meet boys outside of the house and before marriage. And then the father and the mother, mostly the father, arranged for her whom to marry and when. And then he got from the supervision and the power of man over her, of her father, to the power of her husband. At that time, we have a typical picture of the Natrum Muriaticum constitution. We have a young woman or an older woman. Let's start from young woman. We had a young girl who was in the house, was reading romantic novels, and was dreaming of the day that the knight riding that white horse, the prince, would come to save her from the boredom and suppression of her family. And then they would live happily ever after. That knight would be sensitive, gentle, with good manners, would love her greatly and respect her greatly. And he would be a decent man. And they would have a holy family, and they would live as a family happily ever after. This is the typical background picture, social and family picture, that can create a Natrum Muriaticum constitution. Nowadays, in the modern world, this has changed a little, but in the center, not in the periphery, it is the same main idea. We have a girl, mostly a girl, that is psoric, very psoric. It is very introvert, very romantic, very sensitive, and with easily hurt, easily vexated, but keeps all this inside. And when it keeps it inside and gets hurt, then we have nervous symptoms, because she doesn't shout, she doesn't take it out of her chest easily. And so this accumulates and creates nervous headaches, nervous neuralgias, oppression chest, and so on, migraines, tension headaches. That is the essence and the background of a Natrum Muriaticum. Nowadays, in modern times, we will see again that the Natrum Muriaticum girl is introvert, although women in nowadays in Western societies are equally to man and are ambitious and are business women and tend to be modern in their relations, in sex, in everyday life. Nevertheless, a Natrum Muriaticum woman is introverted, conservative, sensitive, and not coping up with her time. She lives in that past romantic psoric era, although this is nowadays a syphilitic era. So she is in disunion most of the times with the surroundings, with her parents, with her brothers and sisters, with her friends at school, with at her profession, and so on.